Member Saanich North and the Islands.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. British Columbia's coastal old-growth forests are rare. These forests sustain unique and endangered ecosystems and species and are of immense cultural value to Indigenous peoples. Left standing, old growth supports entire ecotourism economies. They filter the water we drink, they're essential to salmon health, and prevent landslides and erosion. Old growth is also a non-renewable resource, but on Vancouver Island, Mr. Speaker, it's almost gone. 79% of the original productive old growth has been logged, and 90% of the high productivity valley bottoms are gone too. Despite their rarity and the ecological importance, we continue to actively log these forests. On the coast, 54% of everything we log is old growth. We're managing them to zero, Mr. Speaker. BCTS, the government's logging agency, just suspended their auction of 109 hectares of old growth within meters of the Juan de Fuca Provincial Park due to public outrage. But these auctions are happening all across the island, and it cannot continue. Through you, Honourable Speaker, to the Premier, considering what is at stake, how does he justify the continued logging of coastal old growth?
Minister of Forests, Lands, Natural Resources and Rural Development.
Thank you. Thank you, Honourable Speaker, and thank you to the member for the question, because old growth management is important in BC, and that's because we value old growth forests for their contribution to biodiversity and for the way old growth forest supports forestry workers and communities on Vancouver Island and along the coast and across BC. We therefore, Honourable Speaker, must take a thoughtful and considered approach to old growth management on Vancouver Island. We'll be engaging soon on an old growth plan with communities and First Nations on Vancouver Island. And in the meantime, Honourable Speaker, we're taking steps. Steps, as the member mentioned, to recognize the unique and endangered ecosystems on Vancouver Island. We set aside 70,000 hectares on Vancouver Island and the coast for the protection of marbled murrelet and northern goshawk. And we're ensuring that the forests of Vancouver Island are used better to support communities with our Coast Forest Sector Revitalization Plan, which will drive more logs to domestic manufacturing and reduce the amount of waste so that pulp mills have better fibre supply.
Member for Saanich North and the Islands on a supplemental.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The thoughtful and considered approach is to continue cutting it, which doesn't last very long, Mr. Speaker. It only goes until there's nothing left. Like I said, we are managing this resource to zero. Logging coastal old growth simply isn't good for jobs in the long term. And that's because it's a finite resource. Once they're gone, they're gone. At this rate, that will be much sooner than later, Mr. Speaker. If we act now, we can successfully transition our coastal forestry to a sustainable second growth industry. This means using science-based methods to determine what forests to leave and which ones to harvest. All the evidence points to leaving high productivity old growth intact. We must log selectively to minimize environmental impacts, and we need to invest in value-added manufacturing here on the coast. Value-added jobs are more resilient to market factors and higher paying. It's the best case scenario for forest workers, for the tourism operators, for the environment. Today, we called for a moratorium on logging in old-growth hotspots on Vancouver Island, Mr. Speaker. We cannot afford to wait for the government to delay any longer. The time to act is now, for the benefit of coastal economies, communities, and the environment. Through you, Honourable Speaker, to the Premier, will you institute a moratorium on logging the few intact, productive, old-growth forests on Vancouver Island?
Minister of Forests, Lands, Natural Resources and Rural Development.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. And we aren't managing the old growth forests on Vancouver Island to zero. There's 500,000 hectares of old growth forests protected in parks and other protected areas on Vancouver Island, Honourable Speaker. But I do acknowledge the member's point and those who are concerned about old growth forest management, because old growths sustain diverse wildlife, they regulate water flows, and they have an important impact on the nutrient cycling. We also know that old growth forests are an important part of community's economic future, as well as workers in the forest industry. We want to get a better understanding of that by engaging with public and First Nations and communities, the 45 First Nations on Vancouver Island who have an interest in the forest surrounding those communities. We'll be doing that in a thoughtful and measured approach very soon, and that's the way we're going to get to better management of old-growth forests on Vancouver Island.